the business of management consulting fundamentally is. What if I told you that one of the most prestigious and profitable industries in the world, one that charges millions for its elite advice, is built on a foundation of structural flaws and managed by people with almost no real world experience? And what if that same industry, after decades of unprecedented success, is now facing an existential crisis that threatens its very survival? This isn't a hypothetical scenario, it's the reality of modern management consulting. At its most fundamental level, the business of management consulting operates on a simple, alluring premise. When a corporation or a government entity confronts a problem it cannot or will not solve internally, it turns to a cohort of outside experts. These firms are brought in to apply their specialized knowledge, diagnose complex issues, and prescribe solutions. They are, in essence, brains for hire, external strategists summoned to provide clarity in the face of ambiguity or inefficiency. Their core function is advisory, existing entirely to analyze a client's predicament and provide a map toward a more profitable, streamlined, or strategically sound future. The primary product delivered by these firms is not a tangible good or a completed piece of infrastructure. Instead, their output is intangible: knowledge, strategy, and analysis. This product is almost universally delivered in the form of recommendations, often packaged in the industry's most iconic and to some infamous artifact, the slide deck. These presentations, sometimes running to dozens or even hundreds of pages, are the culmination of weeks or months of analysis and represent the core value proposition. They are the physical manifestation of the advice for which clients pay millions, a synthesis of data and strategic direction intended to guide the highest levels of executive leadership. The industry is dominated by a clear hierarchy of key players. At the apex are the big three, the most prestigious and strategy focused firms: McKinsey and Company, Boston Consulting Group, BCG, and Bain and Company. These three firms are the blue bloods of the consulting world, commanding the highest fees and tackling the most significant strategic questions for Fortune 5 to 100 companies and national governments. Their focus is on high level strategy, the what and the why of a business's direction. Beneath this top tier are the big four, a group of massive professional services firms that include Deloitte, PwC, Ernst and Young, EY, and KPMG. These firms, which originated in the fields of audit and accounting, have built formidable consulting arms of their own. While they also compete in the strategy space, their traditional strength and the bulk of their revenue often come from implementation based projects. They are the how of the consulting world, frequently brought in to execute the complex, large scale technological and operational shifts that the big three might have recommended. The menu of services offered by these firms is vast, designed to address nearly every facet of a modern organization. The first category, strategy, is the traditional heartland of the big three. This involves long term planning, advising on market entry into new countries or sectors, refining competitive positioning against rivals, and developing sophisticated pricing strategies to maximize profitability. Operations consulting, by contrast, is focused on the internal mechanics of a company. Consultants in this practice map out workflows to identify and eliminate inefficiencies, specializing in process optimization, supply chain management, and broad cost reduction initiatives. In the 21st century, the technology and digital practice has exploded in importance. This category includes everything from advising on massive digital transformation projects and enhancing cybersecurity protocols to most recently developing and implementing artificial intelligence strategies, a field that has become both a massive opportunity and an existential threat to the industry itself. Closely related is human capital consulting, which focuses on the people side of the equation. These consultants are brought in to manage organizational restructuring, facilitate the complex human integration following a merger, and advise on talent management and leadership development. Finally, the mergers and acquisitions (M&A) practice is one of the industry's most lucrative and foundational pillars. In this capacity, consultants are crucial partners in the corporate deal making process. They perform rigorous due diligence to vet potential acquisition targets, build valuation models to determine a fair price, and, perhaps most critically, develop and oversee the post merger integration plan to fuse two distinct corporate cultures and operations into one functional entity. It was this M&A boom, in fact, that first catapulted the industry from a niche service to a global powerhouse. Now, this industry wasn't always this way. It's crucial to understand its historical rise and the major pivots it has taken. The management consulting industry as we know it today was forged in the economic crucible of the 1990s. This period, often referred to as the M&A golden age, was characterized by a fervent, almost religious belief in deregulation. Rules that had kept industries in check for decades were systematically torn down, unleashing a tidal wave of corporate consolidation. The annual value of mergers and acquisitions ballooned, creating corporate titans of unprecedented scale. This M&A boom, however, created massive complex problems. When two giant companies merged, they were suddenly saddled with staggering redundancies. A newly formed entity would find itself with two finance departments, two human resources teams, two marketing divisions, and two separate supply chains. What if I told you that one of the most prestigious and profitable industries in the world, one that charges millions for its elite advice, is built on a foundation of structural flaws and managed by people with almost no real world experience? And what if that same industry, after decades of unprecedented success, is now facing an existential crisis that threatens its very survival? This isn't a hypothetical scenario, it's the reality of modern management consulting. They would parachute into these newly merged, chaotic organizations, meticulously map out the redundancies, and identify the precise areas and people that could be cut without causing the entire machine to grind to a halt. This wave of post merger cleanups was astonishingly profitable. By the late 1990s, firms like McKinsey and BCG had become permanent, powerful, and incredibly wealthy fixtures of corporate America. But this golden age could not last. The same deregulatory fervor that fueled their rise eventually led to massive corporate scandals, the most infamous of which was the collapse of Enron. The spectacular implosion of this corporate giant, which wiped out billions in shareholder value, triggered a public and political backlash. This in turn led to a period of re regulation, most notably with the passage of the Sarbanes Oxley Act. This new regulatory environment quickly cooled the mad rush of deals. The M&A boom that had been the industry's lifeblood slowed dramatically, and consultants were forced to find a new massive client base to sustain their growth. They found it in the government. The industry executed one of the most significant pivots in corporate history, shifting its focus from the private sector to the public sector. By the 2000s, many government workforces had themselves grown large, complex, and notoriously inefficient. Seeing an opportunity, officials turned to the very consultants who had streamlined corporate America, hoping their private sector magic could fix the bureaucracy. This pivot to government contracts looked like a brilliant business opportunity, and in the short term, it was. Federal spending on outside management consultants tripled. However, this strategic shift also planted the seeds of the industry's future downfall. By moving into sectors where accountability was diffuse, where success was hard to measure, and where the consequences for failure were minimal, the industry began its long drift away from being a service of measurable value. And toward the punchline, it is often seen as today. But this model, for all its success, is built on a foundation of what I see as core structural flaws. The consulting model, despite its image of elite expertise, is built upon a foundation of structural flaws. The most significant of these is a profound lack of real world experience. The industry's entire hiring model is predicated on recruiting a very specific type of person, a recent graduate from an elite university. Firms fight fiercely to hire top students from Ivy League schools, Oxford, Cambridge, and their global equivalents. These graduates are undeniably intelligent and academically accomplished, but they possess almost no practical industry experience. A 22-year-old with a degree in philosophy or economics is almost overnight tasked with advising a 55-year-old CEO on how to run a global manufacturing business. This structural inexperience is reinforced by the up or out policy, a ruthless system of planned attrition that defines the industry's pyramid shaped career path. Junior analysts and associates are hired in large numbers at the bottom of this pyramid. They are given a set period, often just 2 or 3 years, to prove themselves worthy of promotion to the next level. If they fail to secure that promotion, they are unceremoniously asked to leave. This system ensures a constant churn of junior staff and maintains a hyper competitive internal culture. The flawed logic of this model is striking. The people performing the vast majority of the actual work, the data analysis, the spreadsheet modeling, the grunt work, are the youngest, most inexperienced, and lowest paid employees. This model persists for one simple reason: it is incredibly profitable. These graduates are cheaper to hire and, as will be discussed, are culturally conditioned to work extreme hours, maximizing the firm's billable hours. The result is a system where individuals with virtually no management experience are the ones generating the analysis that forms the basis of senior management advice. The second core flaw is a near total absence of accountability. This problem, which began with the pivot to government contracts, has become a defining feature of the industry. Consultants have no skin in the game. They are paid handsomely for their advice, not for the ultimate outcome of that advice. They are given a set period, often just 2 or 3 years, to prove themselves worthy of promotion to the next level. If they fail to secure that promotion, they are unceremoniously asked to leave. This system ensures a constant churn of junior staff and maintains a hyper competitive internal culture. The flawed logic of this model is striking. Firms are explicitly not liable for a company's performance, and bad recommendations rarely tarnish their reputation, especially in the sprawling, opaque world of government work. This dynamic has allowed the illusion of value to become the industry's primary product. As long as the image of value is maintained, the actual substance becomes secondary. If a company follows a consultant's recommendation and it leads to disaster, a failed product launch, a botched restructuring, or a catastrophic market entry, the consultant is insulated from the consequences. They have already cashed the check and moved on to the next client. This lack of culpability is written directly into their contracts. The direct fees are staggering, with top tier firms charging millions of dollars for a single project. Governments and corporations collectively spend billions of dollars every single year on these advisory contracts, a significant line item that is often justified as a necessary cost of expert guidance. But the indirect costs are far more damaging and insidious. An organization's over reliance on consultants prevents it from ever developing its own in house capabilities. Why hire, train, and retain a team of internal strategists when you can simply call McKinsey? This creates a cycle of dependency. Every time a problem arises, the organization must go back to the same consultants as it has allowed its own problem solving muscles to atrophy. This reliance not only drains budgets, but also robs organizations of the institutional knowledge and expertise they need to function independently and effectively. This brings up a critical question. If the model is so flawed, why do so many firms keep hiring them? Let's talk about the actual utility of consultants. Given these profound flaws, the inexperience, the lack of accountability, and the extreme costs, a rational observer might wonder why any organization would continue to hire management consultants. The answer is that the stated utility, expert advice, is often not the actual utility. The true reasons for hiring these firms are far more cynical and strategic, rooted in corporate and political maneuvering. The single most effective and common use for a consultant is liability deflection, or more colloquially, ass covering. For a senior manager or executive facing a deeply unpopular or risky decision, hiring a consulting firm is the ultimate insurance policy. It provides a scapegoat. If a company must lay off 10% of its workforce, a move that would destroy internal morale and make the CEO a pariah, it is far easier to bring in an unbiased third party. The consultants conduct their independent research and unsurprisingly recommend downsizing or right sizing. The executive can then claim their hands were tied. They were simply following the data backed advice of a world class firm. If the decision goes badly and the company's performance plummets, the executives can blame the consultant's flawed analysis, saving their own jobs. This function is closely tied to the need for third party validation. In many cases, senior executives already know exactly what they want to do. A CEO may have decided to sell off a division or exit a market long before any consultant is called. The problem is that they lack the political capital to convince their board of directors or silence internal critics. This is where the prestige of the big three becomes paramount. There is an old saying in the industry: nobody ever got fired for hiring McKinsey. By paying millions for a 100 slide deck that magically aligns perfectly with the executive's pre existing decision, the executive gains an unassailable weapon. The consultant's report isn't a tool for discovery, it's a tool for justification. A darker and more corrupt utility is the revolving door that exists between the consulting industry and the powerful worlds of politics and business. In the political sphere, this manifests as a blatant quid pro quo. Elected officials and senior bureaucrats are in a position to award lucrative multi-million-dollar government contracts to consulting firms. Years later, after leaving office, those same officials are often hired by those very firms as senior partners or advisors, roles that come with enormous salaries. It is a system of deferred payment for services rendered. A similar dynamic, the corporate revolving door, plays out in the private sector. C suite executives who consistently give business to a particular consulting firm are viewed as reliable rainmakers. When those executives are looking for their next job, or when a board is searching for a new CEO, the well connected partners at those consulting firms are in a prime position to make recommendations. They are naturally inclined to recommend the executives who have been loyal clients, ensuring that their firm will continue to get business at the executive's new company. Finally, there is the simplest and most human reason of all: covering for incompetence. Not all senior leaders are in their positions because of merit. Nepotism, internal politics, or sheer luck can place unqualified individuals in roles they are not equipped to handle. For these leaders, consultants are a lifeline. They are quite literally paying someone else to tell them how to do their job, providing the analysis and strategies that the leader is incapable of developing themselves. In this context, the consultant's fee is simply the price of survival. For decades, this system worked, but what we're seeing now is a modern crisis, a sign that the entire model is beginning to unravel. For decades, this flawed, cynical, yet highly profitable model chugged along, protected by its own prestige and the opaque nature of its value. Now, that model is unraveling, facing an existential crisis from multiple fronts. The most significant threat is the artificial intelligence disruption. The core of the consulting pyramid, the army of junior analysts processing data, cleaning spreadsheets, conducting market analysis, and crucially, creating slide decks, is performing work that is now being automated by large language models. This isn't just a minor efficiency gain, it's a direct assault on the industry's fundamental business model. The grunt work that justified multi-million-dollar fees and provided the training ground for future partners is vanishing. We're talking about the initial market research, the drafting of competitor landscapes, the generation of SWOT analyses, and the construction of complex financial models from templates. All of this can now be generated in minutes, not weeks. This automation leads directly to fee compression. The industry's entire justification for its high fees was based on the expert analysis performed by its best and brightest. But as clients gain access to the exact same AI tools, they are beginning to question why they should pay millions of dollars for basic analysis they can now run themselves. The value proposition of the junior consultant grunt work is evaporating. This places the consulting firms in a painful bind. Their old business model is being automated, so their new business model must be selling AI implementation services to their clients. The problem is they are proving to be exceptionally inept at it. The skills required to build and deploy complex AI systems are not the same as those needed to make a PowerPoint. The result has been a string of high profile failures, such as Accenture's $75 million US patent office project, which performed so badly that the office banned generative AI outright. This failure captures the bind perfectly. The deep technical expertise required for this new world doesn't reside in the conference rooms of McKinsey. It resides in the research labs of tech companies like OpenAI and Google. Consultants are trying to sell a product they don't truly understand how to implement, and their advice is often generic, lacking the specific deep engineering knowledge required for success. This technological disruption is compounded by fierce competition, both old and new. Among traditional rivals, a gap is emerging. McKinsey's growth, once seemingly unstoppable, has stalled, leading to its first major layoffs in years. Meanwhile, rivals like Boston Consulting Group, which adapted more quickly to the need for digital specialists and building technology platforms, have continued to grow robustly. The Big Four, with their deep benches of technology implementation specialists and lower price points, are also in a better position to compete on these new tech focused projects. But the more dangerous threat comes from tech first competitors. Companies like Palantir, which are fundamentally software companies, are now competing directly with consultants and winning. Their model is completely different. They don't sell advice, they sell a subscription to a powerful software platform like their Foundry operating system. Then they embed their own highly skilled engineers, not recent MBA graduates, with the client to make the platform work, integrating it directly into the client's operations. The client gets a tangible, lasting tool and the expertise to use it, not a static slide deck that sits on a shelf. This is a fundamental shift from a temporary advisory service to a permanent operational integration, and it's a model the old guard is ill equipped to fight. These external pressures are colliding with the industry's internal market dynamics to create a perfect storm. Consulting is a cyclical industry. When the economy is good, companies have budgets for advisory projects. And when the economy slumps, those projects are the first to be cut. The post COVID economic downturn has halted projects worldwide. This has exposed the fact that firms hired aggressively during the post COVID boom, creating a massive oversupply of talent. With too many consultants and not enough projects, the industry has been forced into mass layoffs. McKinsey, the industry's standard bearer, was forced to cut 10% of its workforce, a move that would have been unthinkable just years earlier, and many firms have delayed the start dates for their new graduate hires indefinitely. This all feeds into a dangerous feedback loop, the talent drain. The consulting industry's entire brand was built on its prestige and its ability to attract the best and brightest from every graduating class. But with the industry's flaws so publicly exposed, its up or out culture seen as toxic, and its mass layoffs making headlines, that prestige is vanishing. Why would a top computer science graduate from Stanford or MIT choose to go to McKinsey to manage an AI model's output when they could go to OpenAI or Google to build the model itself? The springboard argument is weakening. A few years at a consulting firm is no longer the undisputed fast track to the C suite, especially if the primary skills you're learning are the very ones being automated. A resume showing you helped build a core product at a successful tech startup is rapidly becoming the new prestige marker. As the firms lose the best and brightest, their claim to expert status rings hollow, further diminishing their prestige and making it even harder to attract the next generation of top talent. To really grasp this, we have to look at the people themselves, the consultant, the culture they live in, the persona they're hired for, and the scandals that have followed. To understand the consulting industry, one must understand the people who populate it. Firms are not just looking for smart graduates, they are looking for a very specific persona, a type they refer to as the insecure overachiever. This is the ideal hire. These are individuals who have a lifetime of exceptional achievements, perfect grades, leadership in extracurriculars, elite university acceptance, but who are nonetheless driven by a profound internal need for validation and a deep seated fear of inadequacy. This persona is perfect for the consulting culture. An insecure overachiever is entirely self motivating and self disciplining. Their desire to please authority and their fear of being exposed as a failure means they will willingly work the 80 to 100-hour weeks that the job demands. They will cancel personal plans, work all night, and sacrifice their health to get the project done and win the approval of their managers and partners. This behavior is, of course, exceptionally profitable for the firm's billable hours model. The natural consequence of this culture is burnout. The industry runs on a planned attrition model. It knows and expects that most of its junior hires will not last. The average tenure for a consultant is around 2 to 3 years. The relentless pressure, the extreme hours, and the constant travel are physically and mentally exhausting. This is exacerbated by the intangible nature of the work. A consultant can spend 3 months of their life working 100-hour weeks on a project, pouring their energy into a slide deck only to hand it off and never find out if it was implemented or what the results were. This lack of tangible accomplishment, of seeing a project through to completion, leads to a profound sense of burnout and emptiness. This is why exit opportunities are the single most important currency in the industry. Very few people join consulting with the intention of making it a lifelong career. They join because a 2 year stint at McKinsey or Bain is seen as the ultimate springboard. It is a stamp of approval on a resume that opens doors to high level corporate strategy roles, venture capital, private equity, or executive positions. The job itself is a grueling rite of passage endured for the sake of the career it unlocks afterward. For an industry built on an image of pristine professionalism, its reputation has been irreparably stained by major ethical scandals. These are not minor missteps, but profound moral failures that expose the dark side of the advice without accountability model. McKinsey's work with Purdue Pharma is perhaps the most infamous. The firm was hired to turbocharge the sale of OxyContin, the drug at the heart of the opioid epidemic. McKinsey's consultants devised strategies to counter emotional messages from mothers of overdose victims and, most chillingly, suggested Purdue pay rebates to pharmacies based on the number of overdoses their customers suffered. Bain and Company faced its own reckoning in South Africa, where it was found to have colluded with the government to enable corruption. The firm's work involved systematically restructuring the National Revenue Service, a move that helped to remove key personnel and effectively hollowed out the agency, allowing for widespread graft and tax evasion. And in Australia, PwC was engulfed in a scandal after one of its senior partners, who was advising the government on new tax laws, breached government confidentiality. He was caught leaking the secret upcoming tax law changes directly to PwC's corporate clients, including Google, Uber, and Facebook, so they could preemptively structure their affairs to avoid paying the new taxes. This all leads us to a final critical point. The management consulting industry is facing a profound identity crisis, and its entire future is in question. The management consulting industry, once an unassailable titan of corporate power, is now facing a profound identity crisis. Its survival for decades was predicated on selling an image of value, an illusion of elite expertise that was protected by its own prestige and the opaque nature of its product. As long as nobody could precisely measure the outcome of its advice, and as long as the best and brightest clamored to join its ranks, the model held. That illusion is now being exposed. New technology, specifically artificial intelligence, is not only automating the industry's core grunt work, but also making outcomes cheaper, more visible, and more measurable. Clients are becoming empowered to do their own analysis, and tech first competitors are delivering tangible products instead of abstract advice. The model's fundamental flaws, the lack of experience, the absence of accountability, and the cynical ass covering function are being laid bare for all to see. The industry is now facing a forced pivot, arguably the most significant in its history. It is being pushed into a profound period of change where it can no longer survive by selling the time of inexperienced graduates and obvious advice in glossy decks.